Welcome into another episode of Cyberly. I'm your host, Blythe Brumley. On this show, we talk about B2B marketing, the attention economy, and how it all fits into the world of logistics. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a few different topics. First, we're going to talk about how AI will replace white-collar jobs faster than blue-collar jobs. We're going to talk to Pam Simon, and she's going to be talking to us about the Future Manifest, the Future of Logistics Conference that's coming up in January, at the end of January, beginning of February. And then Justin Martin from Back the Truck Up is helping us to break down some of the best and worst things that are going on in trucking, especially when it comes to Truck Driver Appreciation Week, which is next week. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the good and the bad ways that truckers are getting appreciated in this industry. And then finally, we are going to top it all off with how fantasy football has kept the Yahoo brand alive. So as we mentioned, let's go ahead and dive into that first topic, and it's how AR, VR, and AI tools are going to help and hurt creative jobs. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is that in previous episodes, we've been talking about, all of the different AI tools that have come into the market really pretty suddenly, whether it's video, whether it's writing, editing, even from the podcast side of things to the video side of things. These tools have exploded in growth in recent years and are expanding rapidly. But this tweet from a longtime social media commenter, Matthew Kobach, has really got me thinking. Let's go ahead and throw that up on the screen, because he says AI is going to replace white collar jobs before blue collar jobs because they're better at creating, or they're better at creative than manual labor. And the reason that this rings true is because of the aforementioned tools, but also it's kind of creating an identity crisis for some artists and creators. Take a look at this account where AI personalities are explaining AI.
Here are 3 things you should never do as a content creator in 2022. Never write your content from scratch. Use AI copywriter tools instead. They will recommend relevant copies that can save 60% of your writing time. Never design your content from scratch. Use AI design templates instead. You can create logos, videos, and banners in minutes. Never spend too much money on filming in a studio. Use AI avatars instead. You can create videos from text with over 60 avatars. I'm also an AI avatar from Synthesia. Follow for more about AI tools.
Pretty incredible watching that. When it's an AI social media account powered by AI. So that means that video talent that you just saw and you just heard from is completely written and created by AI. Now, a human still has to input what he wants that video talent to say and what he wants it to actually, explain on camera. And then that account itself, AI explaining AI, has close to 400,000 followers on TikTok. And they just did like something ridiculous where they had the AI count to 1 million. And that led to an explosive growth in numbers for the social media following. And it sounds a little ridiculous in theory, but when you think about how, this kind of content is being created by robots and it's garnering the attention and the following of different social media platforms, you really have to kind of, see a little bit of the dangers of how, creatives like myself, like other people, are kind of freaking out about how fast all of this technology is evolving. Let's play this next clip.
I love Scott. I think he's going to be okay. But this was sentiment a lot of people had on my post about the AI generated art, that this is going to replace artists now. We shouldn't be embracing something like this. I really don't think that's the case. And I'm going to give you just a prime example right here. So first, this is an artist that I follow, and she recently decided to show her latest print that's available. It is titled Dawn Awakening, and it is watercolor and gouache. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take that title, Dawn Awakening, I'm going to put it into the AI generator, and I'm going to tell it that this is to be done in the style of watercolor mixed with gouache. It gave me this and this. And I mean, they're fine, but they're not like her painting. So then I decided, let me try and give the AI a little more direction. Tell it kind of what is in her image. So I told it, figure of a woman awakening in the morning sun. To that, it gave me this, as well as this. And again, they're fine, but this has no heart. I mean, her image has soul. It has life. It's a tangible being in a moment that we can all recognize. And the AI generated one looks more like a painting you might find at a big box store, already framed, that you hang in an office or a hotel. And it is an artist's soul that an AI is never going to be able to replicate. An AI is never going to be able to do something that lives like this.
And agree with that argument that a lot of these different technologies is lacking a soul, is lacking, the human spirit and the creativeness behind it. Because if you think about it from that lens, then that is something that an AI will never be able to produce. And you have to really hone in on a lot of these different AI generators, and the text that you input into the system is extremely important. There's actually guides that have been created on how to tell the AI what to create in order to make something that's a little bit more usable. Because a lot of these AI generators, some of it that I've played around with is kind of junk, but the more you learn how to give the prompts to the system, the better the better image that you're going to get out of it. And arguably, with a lot of these different platforms, they are only showing images that are in watercolor format, that are in, something that is, you can look right away and kind of tell that that was an AI image. They already kind of have their own style, and that's done on purpose because they know that these tools have the ability to create real looking photos, and it's completely AI generated. So these tools have sort of, from an ethical standpoint, have held back from allowing real type photos that exist. And so I want to go back to that soulful argument, because I believe that if creators in and of them, if they take their job seriously, and and if they want to evolve with the times, and if they want to evolve as they have more tools, it's perfectly fine to still use the tools that you've always used and that historically have always been used. But what if creators started looking at these tools instead of being fearful and started to embrace them, instead of looking at them as sort of like the scary, like man under the bed type of environment? Let's take a look at this example from another TikTok.
I've been working on a new painting commission recently for a client that wanted me to do a mixed media piece on quantum computing. For the reference photos, he sent me a bunch of AI generated artwork. After he sent me all these AI reference images, I was thinking to myself, damn, if I was to go head to head with an AI, do you think I could beat them artistically? I mean, they're pretty expressive works, so this is what I have so far. We have this crazy computer, a ton of abstractions, this main character with the quantum computer coming out of his head, and some other things going on. I'm really trying to focus on the layers with this piece. It's not done yet, but let me know what you guys think. Cody or the AI?
So, that is a perfect example of an artist taking AI generated images that were sent by a client and creating something new that most people would actually love to have in their house versus just a general AI created art or piece of image. And so I think that that's a perfect example of an artist using AI to their advantage. Also, if you've ever been involved in any kind of like graphic design or logo work, you know that getting inspiration from a client is very, very difficult. Trying to get what they envision out of their head and into, a piece of paper, out of, into a conversation, so you can create something that you think they really like. I think using that workflow of having a client go to AI and write in whatever they want and pick what they want as inspiration, and then using that to create your art afterwards, I think that that's a brilliant way to look at this, because then you're getting the imagination from the actual person who needs the job to be done. And then that artist can then take that imagery from there and create something completely unique and completely new. Now, there are other ways that AI is being used, especially when it comes to marketing. I mean, for me personally, when I write website copy, I write out what I want to say, and then I use a tool like copy.ai or there are other tools out there. I think Jasper is another one that you can create copy. There's tons of them that are out there now, but I've primarily used copy.ai. And so when I create my own copy, I then go to that site, I plug in that copy, and I'm given so many more ideas. But those ideas stemmed from what's in my head. And so I think that that's a really great use case if you're struggling, especially for a lot of one-person marketing teams out there. Think about a one person, or not just one person marketing teams, but also like a small trucking company who may not be able to have the resources or the budget or to be able to go and hire a photographer and to have them create some images for their branding, for their website, for all of the things that they need to survive as a small company. They don't have the resources or the skill set to do that. these kind of tools will give them that, and it'll give them that for free. It's sort of limited to what your own imagination can sort of mock up, as long as you are comfortable with watercolor looking images instead of, like real life truck photo images. And then the last one I wanted to get is how an example of retail brands and how they could be using this technology in order to decrease returns, in order to optimize their reverse logistics. Buying clothes is the biggest thing that we do online from a purchasing standpoint. And a lot of the returns that happen in our e-commerce ecosystem is returns because clothing is ill-fitting. It doesn't look right on their particular body. So they return it and they just, they sort of change their mind about the product in general. But what if we could use AI in order to decrease the amount of returns and the amount of reverse logistics that companies have to implement? Let's play the next clip. See, now that technology can be replicated for anyone. You could scan your entire body and then be able to see how that clothing looks and feels on your particular body before you ever buy it, before you ever purchase it. I think AI has an incredible opportunity to sort of take over when it comes to the retail space. And these are all, what I've mentioned so far are mainly positive examples of using this technology. But we got to talk about the ethics and the other side of using AI, because there is a huge concern around the ethical conversation when it comes to using these different technologies. The tools that we see are extremely powerful, but we're seeing also how challenging it is from the current content landscape in order to moderate that content, to make sure that it's real people and not software and bots that are taking over the conversation. It's incredibly difficult to moderate. We've covered that in previous episodes, how challenging it is, not just, for people to discern what's real and what's fake, but also for a lot of the top companies, a lot of the top social media companies that are having really extreme difficulties moderating content that they perceive as being created by real people. But hell, even AI personalities are being created for musicians, for social media profiles, and those types of profiles already exist. So that ethical conversation needs to be had sooner rather than later, because here's an example of AI getting hired, where it's a model called Shudu, and she's a digital model with 250,000 followers, and she's actually a CGI creation by London photographer Cameron James Wilson. And there's a lot of models that are upset that this woman, this digital creator, is getting hired over real life models. So you have an example of AI getting hired, but what about AI getting fired, which is a really unique example, because I believe this artist, quote unquote artist's name is Effin Mecca, which is an augmented reality artist who released a single in August called Florida Water. Go figure. But he used stereotypes in his lyrics that offended many in the Black community. And so he was dropped from the label. And this is a completely made up virtual AI driven artist that was signed to a label and then dropped from a label. That is some next level, we're already in Ready Player One type scenarios. So both of these, the hired and the fired sort of creative personalities, those are more on the, I guess, experimental side of things. But what happens when a private industry or governments, either known or unknown, are going to start using this technology? And maybe I would assume that it's far more advanced than what the general public has access to. But what if these tools are going to start being used to slander a political rival, or to pretend as if you are representing a business when it's actually a competitor who's impersonating you? All of these situations are very plausible to happen with the technology that is available right now, between deep fakes and also, and of course, the AI personalities that we just mentioned, but deep fakes and, synthesia and, being able to match audio to a new conversation based off of audio patterns that someone has already spoken to, say like a creator like myself who has hours and hours of content already available on the web. there could be people that could take those recordings and record it and then make me say something completely new that I never said. And so with situations like this, we are going to have to really have that ethical conversation on what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And we really need to think about, properly, creating legislation around this that prevents some of these tools from being able to do that. Because it was just a year ago that for a lot of our government officials, they are so behind on just the general knowledge of what these tools are capable of. And it's evolving so rapidly. We just had a senator that was a year ago. He talked about ending Finsta. He had a public hearing. Senator Richard Blumenthal, he asked a Facebook executive to end Finsta at a hearing. And Finsta, the fact that you are even making that comment just proves that you do not have a general understanding of what the social media landscape is, because Finsta is just a slang word for a fake Instagram account. So usually teens, especially ones that want to kind of hide a lot of their content from, maybe some other people, maybe their family, maybe they kind of, they want to have the family facing profile, and they want to have a fake one where they can kind of be a little bit more themselves. That is a Finsta. So this senator, not knowing the different terminologies and the different slang that is being used on these different platforms, these are the people that we're going to have to be trusting to be able to legislate properly on what these AI tools will be able to do and what they won't be able to do. And so there are a couple different solutions that are being talked about from some of the groups that I follow and some of the discussions that I'm involved with. There are blockchain solutions that are hopefully being developed that can verify that, say, a video like this or a recording like this can have almost a digital watermark. And I think what it's called cryptography, and it adds a digital signature to the content itself. So I think we're going to have to move very quickly. And when I say we, not waiting on governments to sort of legislate this, but we as a society are going to have to really look into these things to get them for ourselves, to protect ourselves and to protect, maybe our companies and then other content that is being created, especially when you think about it from, a political rival or a competitor rival. Obviously, that's a kind of an oxymoron, but a competitor is a rival. But it just bringing this all full scope, that while we have all of these amazing tools that can really help the one person marketing team and can really help, a lot of the solar creators around there, out there, entrepreneurs, small teams, just in and of itself, it's so important to have a media brand. And you can use these tools to your advantage, but we also need to be really wary about how fast this technology is developing, and then to create solutions around combating, a lot of the issues that are going to start to arise if they haven't already, sort of entered our ecosphere as it is. So I think it's ultimately a good thing that a lot of these tools exist, but we're going to have to be weary about the dangers and the unforeseen dangers that we might not even be aware of. So that's kind of my little pitch for, how AI is probably going to take over white collar jobs faster than blue collar jobs. And it's an interesting discussion. We're obviously going to follow this and report on more of it in the coming months and with future shows. But it's time to get to our first guest, and that is Pam Simon, Conference Chair for Manifest, the Future of Logistics. Welcoming her back to her second appearance on this show. Super happy to have Pam back on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now we digitally met in this environment, about a year ago, and then we met in person over at the Manifest conference earlier this year, back in January, over in Vegas. And it was one of the best conference experiences I've ever had. And so I'm super happy to welcome you back and find out all the cool things that are going on. But first, give us a little bit of insight into how you started managing, the Manifest conference and became the conference chair, and a little bit of background on Manifest itself before we get into the conference for this year.
Sure. So prior to Manifest, I was a partner at Lab Ventures, which is a venture studio builder in Miami. And the verticals that we were focusing on were the ones that were dominating the space, the businesses in Miami. So travel, logistics, and real estate. And obviously, here we are with logistics. So it was an area that I was most excited about. And at the end of 2019, Connective, which is our parent company now, acquired my show, Future of Logistics Tech. So with that acquisition, we've transformed that, and which was my show, which was a boutique show, so 500 invite only, into Manifest, which is a global gathering for logistics. It's the only show in the industry that actually covers the entire scope of the supply chain. So from maritime through last mile and within the four walls. Loved having you at this year's show, which we had about 1,500 executives from over 30 different countries.
That's incredible. So how, I guess, how has the conference evolved from what was the biggest challenge, I guess, from the first conference compared to this upcoming conference?
Well, the first, obviously, with this year, we were right smack in the middle of an Omicron wave. So that was very different. I don't think any of us have ever experienced doing an event in that type of an environment. So it was, I think, making sure all of the safety precautions were in place made things a little bit chaotic, but no cases. So clearly we figured it out. Going into this year's show, it's been a lot smoother. I think people are more comfortable. Travel bans have been lifted, and there's a lot of FOMO for the folks that weren't able to come this year. We've seen, actually, especially from the brand perspective, we have a lot more shippers or retailers that are confirmed now that weren't able to come due to travel restrictions this year, as well as the ports. So we've been able to expand, I guess, not only our reach, but also the different areas of the supply chain that we'll be diving into.
And you had mentioned earlier about how you were creating content, sort of your own show, perhaps, leading up into the last year's Manifest conference, or really this year's Manifest conference, but the upcoming conference as well. How are you handling those conversations, I guess, from a promotion standpoint? Are you still kind of interviewing people every week leading up into the show? Give us a little rundown of what the content plan looks like for Manifest.
Well, for leading up to the show, I do have a fireside chat series. So I've been interviewing lots of different executives over the last few weeks, and we'll continue doing that probably up until November. Then it's all hands down for the actual show, which will take place January 31st to February 2nd at Caesars Forum. And we're expecting a much bigger turnout. This year we had 1,500, again, with Omicron and everything going on. And we're expecting between 3,000 and 4,000 attendees for
Oh,
next
wow.
year's show. Yeah, so
Holy
definitely a
crap.
jump. I mean, to be fair, we did max out of our space at the Paris this year. So it will be great to have a lot more room for the different exhibitions that we'll be doing. From a content perspective, the first day of the show for 2023 will actually be divided into three parts. Intelligent infrastructure, where we'll dive into what a digital city looks like and implementation of 5G. Maritime, data sharing, the role of IoT, and why drayage doesn't have to suck. And then we'll do a deep dive into sustainability and answer the question, like, what goes into a connected and sustainable supply chain, and how can it be scaled? And that includes your panel as well. What the S stands for in ESG.
I love that because and that's where I kind of wanted to get in with your content of what you're doing, because I think that's so smart to feature a lot of these different companies and interview them ahead of time, give the audience a chance to not only from the FOMO from the actual event, but the future conversations that you're about to have at the upcoming conference. So give us a little bit, maybe like a high level overview of what to expect at this year's event.
So in addition to the first day, which will include those three tracks, on our main stage, we do have an incredible selection of educational talks, including American Eagle, DHL, Walmart, Stored, Flex, Intel, Vitamin Shop, Viho. I mean, we're really bringing the entire ecosystem together. And we'll be covering topics such as smart mobility, warehouse automation, robotics, end-to-end visibility, automation, electrification, last mile returns, and cybersecurity. So we'll really be covering every aspect of how goods are moved from point A until it arrives at your doorstep.
I love the cybersecurity angle because I feel like that's something that is not talked about enough within this space. And it really is. It's such a problem whenever you can have a company get attacked and all of their systems are down for an entire week. So I'm excited to see that. What about the trade show floor? Because that is where I was just blown away last year. You had a full like autonomous truck row. You had the infamous puppy lounge. You had like a Bloody Mary and donut bar. Like it was all of these cool things that I think it was Courtney who also works for Manifest as well and Connective. And so she was saying that she really wanted to prioritize these bonding events separate kind of separate from the industry itself. Is that are those things going to be happening at the upcoming conference too?
Yes, and we don't even use the word trade show. It's kind of icky. We say off-grid experience. And
Ah,
so yes, off-grid, because it's really a time for you to connect and network, as well as see and experience all the different technologies firsthand. So you'll be able to see how Exotech and Mugen and Dexterity and Kaja Robotics actually move things around the warehouse. And there'll be different vehicle experiences from Solo ATV and Waymo. You'll have our demo stage, which will feature some of the most disruptive companies from around the world, from autonomous flight to delivery robots. I mean, I agree with you. I've always believed shared experiences are the best way for partnerships to flourish. So we've developed a lot of unique and exciting surprise and connect activations, including all creature comforts. So from our coffee lounge sponsored by MasterCard to our beer garden by One Rail, Seco's Wine Bar, and of course mocktails from Wise Systems. There'll be co-working spaces by Datamatics, and yes, your favorite place, Giottis will be bringing back the Puppy Lounge, which I think honestly is one of the best because it really humanizes people, and you end up making like real connections there. Um, it's all part of the surprise and delight that we bring to the show.
yeah, 100%. Because with the puppy lounge, I think I visited a half a dozen times and just kind of sat on. I did like actually do an interview and we aired it on Cyberly. But the other times it was just having a bunch of treats and just playing around with the puppies. Because like you said, this was, one of the first big conferences. Kind of COVID concerns are still really heightened during that time as well. So you're talking to a lot of people when you might not be used to talking to a lot of people. So being able to take a break and go to the puppy lounge and kind of, de-stress a little bit was something that was really, really welcome or welcoming. And I've seen, other people that was the highlight for them was being able to go to the puppy lounge. So I absolutely love it. And then one of the other really cool things was the Ludacris concert. I have listened to Ludacris since I was a child. I probably shouldn't even admit that if my mom is listening or
We all
watching. But with that concert, he was 5 feet from me. I would never have that experience anywhere else. And so, what kind of entertainment away from the conference or the off the grid experiences are you guys planning for this year's event?
Let me tell you about the women's luncheon first, and then
Oh, yes.
then I'll tell you who's the surprise guest. So our women's luncheon this year was a huge hit. Apparently, I mean, for the logistics and supply chain ecosystem, it's something that really hasn't been done, and it's open to men and women, and it was packed. It was one of the highlights of the show. So, and it's brought to you by DHL will be sponsoring this year, and obviously our president, Courtney Muller, is the one that puts it together. We'll have speakers from MIT as well as the president of packaging for DHL. According to research, 19% of C-level positions in supply chain are for women today. That's up 15% from last year, but we still have a lot to do. So I'm looking forward to this event for sure. And then when it comes to the entertainment, I'm very excited to share that for our closing party, we will be having Nelly perform. So
That's
get ready
crazy.
to.
I cannot believe that last year's conference. I was like, I cannot believe there are this many logistics people at a Ludacris concert, and then this year you guys are up in the ante and you're bringing in Nelly. I cannot wait to see some of these sort of like, not stuffy people, but very like suit and tie people be able to get down at a Nelly conference, or a Nelly concert at a conference. And so I think you guys are doing an incredible job. Where can folks follow more of Manifest work, register for the conference, all that good stuff?
So please sign up for our newsletter, The Fest, that goes out to a few thousand people every week, and it includes our headlines from our fireside chat series. Go to manifest.com, register today. This is the main industry event that you cannot afford to miss. We're bringing the entire ecosystem together, from investors to shippers to suppliers and startups from around the globe. And it'll be taking place January 31st to February 2nd at Caesars Forum in Las Vegas.
Cannot wait. Thank you so much, Pam, for coming on the show. It's already on my radar. It's a must attend event. And I think that everybody who's working in logistics should absolutely be at this conference. So thank you so much for giving us a little preview of this upcoming conference, and can't wait to see you at the end of January.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and excited to have you back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that is one at the end. I don't want to say the end of one great discussion and on to the next, but it kind of is. That conference was really sort of, I guess, after a couple of years of wanting to go back to conferences and not being able to, that was a hell of a way to get back into the swing of things, of being able to go to Las Vegas and be able to hang out and see all of the autonomous trucks in one room, all the robotics in one room, see people that you've only communicated with digitally, but also meeting in person. So all of those good things, highly, highly recommend going to that conference. And I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking at it. I'm saying this because I would be going to it even if I wasn't speaking at it. So all that said, let's go ahead and bring in our next guest. This is Justin Martin. He is the social media content creator for Back the Truck Up. So let's welcome in Justin. We got Truck Driver Appreciation Week coming up, and so we're excited to hear the lowdown on you and how Back the Truck Up came to fruition and how you got involved with the platform and with the site. So go ahead and give us a rundown on who Justin Martin is, how long you were driving for, and all that good stuff.
Hey, Blythe, thanks for having me. Yeah, I was a 15-year veteran driver. I did 7 years over the road, 7 years local. In the last 5 years of that, I was with the Postal Service, and I was on my break one day and scrolling through Twitter and saw a posting for a job asking if you were a truck driver with some social media savvy. And I said, "Oh, that sounds like me." And I applied, and poof, here I am. I can't believe it.
So you were actively involved with social media well before you ever got involved with Back the Truck Up.
Yeah, mostly just for killing time. People don't realize there's like an entire talent pool of guys out there that just they're doing this for fun, not realizing that there actually is a potential career to go into this. Same with me. I had no idea that wasting time on Photoshop in my teens and early 20s would actually benefit me later on in my career.
Heck yeah. I mean, it really is I've been sort of screaming from the mountaintops for a while now that drivers have hands down the best social media following in all of logistics, and really comparatively to other industries, they have such a strong social media following. So when you were creating content, were you doing a lot of videos? Were you doing, maybe just like Instagram, Twitter? Give us a little bit of a rundown of what your content creation looked like before Back the Truck Up, and then now that you're working full time with Back the Truck Up.
Yeah, definitely not so much video. I was always camera face outward or stuff in the news, very topical stuff. You take a screenshot, you add some funny text, and then put it on, and you put it on message forums just for laughs. Starting with Back the Truck Up, I had to get more into TikTok and what everyone's into now, and that's like a whole different animal right there. The learning curve for me to go from excuse me, from Twitter into TikTok was just a straight line upwards.
And so when you're working as a trucker and then you decide that you're going to take this job at Back the Truck Up. So with that, how did your, how did your job, change from a daily standpoint? Were you excited to not be on the road? Were you excited or do you kind of miss being out on the road? Give us a little bit of rundown on what it's like to go from being out on the road to working from home, essentially.
Yeah, so basically, I when I was over the road on the road, my life was on pause. Basically, I was just working. I'd be out 3, 4, 5. I think my record was 6 months at a time,
Wow.
just to see if I could. You basically have to like mentally trick yourself into thinking that you're camping, as a way of doing it. I mean, you catch a hotel like every couple of weeks or so, but then switching from that to local, at least you're home every night. You're sleeping in your own bed. You can kind of settle down and put down roots. And then when I saw this job post, it was remote, so you're home every night. For me, that was unbeatable. I went from working at the Postal Service, so I was a government employee with government benefits. I could have very easily coasted the rest of my life in this career, but I saw this as like a great opportunity to be able to grow a brand, grow a following, talk to drivers, talk to companies, and try and merge the two together, because I noticed that there is a disconnect between companies trying to find drivers and drivers trying to find good companies.
So let's talk about a little bit about what you guys actually talk about on Back the Truck Up. Is there a conscious, plan of what you're going to cover on, maybe like a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or are you guys really, just finding out what the in the trenches truckers are talking about, and then you're crafting stories and advice around that? Or is it maybe a little bit of both?
Definitely both. You want to cover, Dooner is very specific on evergreen topics. We want people to be able to go on the site and see stuff that's happening currently, but then also, something 6 months to a year from now, go back and everything's still relevant. There's always stuff to talk about. Even today, right now, I don't know if you've been watching the headline news, but Queen Elizabeth just died. So that's kind of taking over the headlines right now. But even the Queen was a truck driver, in World War II. So there's always truck driving is in everything.
Oh, that's such a great point because I mean, as someone who is, I've been obsessed with the royal family since, Lady Diana or Princess Diana. And so I was refreshing the news all day. And you bring up a great point about the historical implications of somebody like the Queen passing away. And you are very, very right. Back in, I think it was World War II, she used to actually work on the trucks as well as a mechanic,
Yeah.
which is just incredible. I don't know how many public leaders have done that throughout their career. I would be willing to bet not many.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about her was anytime there was a very high profile figure coming to visit, she would take them and drive them around in her own truck and just absolutely terrify the living crap out of them because she could drive. She was a hell of a driver. And it's very unassuming, but just you're in a truck with this little old lady and she's just driving the wheels off of it.
Well, speaking of drivers and speaking of, sort of, I guess, the relationship between drivers and the general public, we have Truck Driver Appreciation Week that's coming up next week. What are some good examples that you've seen and maybe some bad examples that you've seen based on your career history and maybe what's going on right now of how drivers are truly or how these companies are truly appreciating their drivers?
It's tough because, you're not your workforce is spread out. So trying to get everybody together for a big office party, just it's almost impossible. I drove for a company based in California, and every year they would have a big office party for Christmas, and they would kind of put out a message like a month or two beforehand to their drivers saying, "Hey, if you want to participate, let us know, and then we'll try and get you a load back to home base here." But I think so many companies right now are just screwing it up because it takes so little for drivers to feel like they're appreciated, and they're just, you know, just today there was a CEO on Twitter putting out a video saying how much he appreciates his drivers and he's going to go on this big tour and stuff, but he's doing it in front of his private jet. Like, wait till you land first, go inside your operating center, find some drivers sitting in the lounge, and then shoot a video with them. Don't put that video out first in front of your private jet, especially for Driver Appreciation Day. Or I'm sorry, Driver
Literally
Appreciation
anywhere
Week.
else. Like you could
Yeah,
have
yeah,
recorded that video anywhere else and it wouldn't have gotten any kind of maybe potential backlash or, getting people talking, but just record it anywhere else. Just try to, I guess maybe have some kind of I don't want to sound like tone deaf, but that sounds like it's a little tone deaf from looking at
yeah.
that
Oh,
video. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
the only thing it was missing was him smoking a cigar.
Well, let's talk, well, are there any companies that I guess that are doing it right that are, showing appreciation? Because that's one of the common things is that yes, it's Truck Driver Appreciation Week, but you hear a lot of companies saying, well, we should appreciate drivers all year round. Are there companies that are actually doing that in this space?
We're looking right now. I haven't seen any personally myself. Being where I was in my career, every day was kind of the same. You're either working or you're not. There was no the idea of appreciation is well, you have a job, so that's your appreciation.
And that's too. I think it was about a year ago that I polled the truckers subreddit, which is incredibly popular subreddit. If you're a redditor, go make sure you follow
Hmm.
that just so you can get a pulse on what's going on. But I had polled them on what gifts do truckers actually want, and a few of the responses were like, "Oh, a really high quality flashlight," or really
Hmm.
durable gloves. But then the number one response was always cash. Just give us cash.
Yeah,
That's what we want.
yeah.
We can't pay our bills with pizza parties and cupcakes and things like that. It was always cash. Is that still relevant? I would imagine that it would be.
Yeah, the companies that are taking care of their drivers, those are the ones you never really hear about. When I started my career in 2007, Harley Davidson and Walmart were the two hardest companies to get into. Now, of course, Harley Davidson doesn't have a trucking fleet anymore, and I think it was Schneider that took them over. But Walmart, they didn't want anybody that had less than 10 years experience, million miles safe driving. If you had even a single hiccup on your license, they wouldn't even look at you. Fast forward, 10, 15 years, their fleet, just like everybody else's fleet, is retiring faster than they can be replaced. So it's a lot easier to get into these companies. But the companies you would hear complaints about that are always saying, "Oh, we have a driver shortage," and et cetera, et cetera. Those are the ones that aren't really taking care of the drivers. You never hear a peep from the ones that are taking care of the drivers, and Walmart was one of them.
Mm. That's a really great point. Now, when it comes to, I guess we had talked earlier about like the content creation side of things and how drivers have a really incredible social media presence. Do you see more companies starting to maybe help drivers, pay them for their content, pay them to create content? Do you see that happening more in the landscape, or is it kind of just companies just letting the drivers create content whenever they want?
Yeah, I haven't seen like sponsored content from companies for their drivers. If there is a company out there that has content that they're putting out themselves, it's usually somebody in their office.
Hmm.
But yeah, they're definitely missing out on like a big opportunity right there. Part of it, I think, is they don't want to be like liable for safety stuff. Obviously, you don't want your driver recording stuff while they're driving, but all the truck driver content creators you see out there they're doing stuff in their cabs as a driver would. But the companies that are putting out content, it's all people that work in the office. So there is a disconnect there.
Yeah, it seems like an incredibly missed opportunity from looking at,
Mhm.
I've suggested this on the show before, is that, some of these carriers just look at the most popular videos that one of your drivers has maybe produced, because the organic reach is already done for you. You already know how it's going to perform. So you already know it's
Yeah.
probably going to do well. So pick ones that are brand safe and then promote them on your own channel. It's an easy win-win for both the driver and for the company, especially if you throw them some extra cash for the awareness that they're bringing your company. That just seems like an easy win for me, and I'm not exactly sure why more companies aren't doing that. Is it brand safety, you think?
Yeah, because a lot of companies they have social media policies. If
Mm.
you're driving for them, but you're putting out videos complaining about something, and you've got like their logo right there behind you, they don't want that reflecting on them.
100%. Yeah, that's true. Which is why I just think that they should still let the drivers post what they want within reason, but then you can always go through
Mhm.
and pick and choose like which ones are brand safety or follow your brand safety guidelines and then promote those as well. It feels like such an easy solution. Not sure why, more companies aren't doing that. But let's get into, a couple more things about you personally, because there's a couple things that I really wanted to hit on. And because you said that you had told me a story back at the F3 conference that or the Freightways to Future Supply Chain Conference. F3 is coming up in
It's
November,
hard to keep these
but
together.
right, we got to keep them all together. But you had told me this crazy story about how the craziest thing that you had hauled or heard about getting hauled, and it was like these like bomb equipment that was being hauled to the middle of nowhere. It turned out to be explosive devices or something like that. Tell us a little bit about the craziest thing you've ever hauled.
Uh, well, a lot of it I can't say publicly because it was classified. But I was always very surprised with hearing the different ways that like old army munitions are disposed of. That story in particular, we were going to a National Guard base in Louisiana, and the company, excuse me, that was in charge of it handled it very poorly. That was the first time I'd ever been inside a facility where I looked around and I went, "My God, we're going to get exploded! Like this is just so unsafe." Um, the company was called Explode Systems Incorporated. The munitions that they were storing inside the building basically took over the inside and they started storing it outside. It was struck by lightning. It became a huge debacle there for the town because nobody wants to live next to a giant pile of explosives. And it's been a mess ever since. Now the problem is that the cleanup from that was done so well that the government approached the town and were like, "Hey, how would you guys like to become, this new storage site for disposing of old bombs?" And it's a double-edged sword because they're really good, high-paying contracting gigs for the government, but then also people are like, "Yo, my kids live here. I don't want them living near this stuff."
Right, it just seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest from the family standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And there's like other companies that are doing it totally perfectly. There was one in Missouri, Joplin, Missouri. We'd go to, and they would dispose of it chemically. You roll in, they take the trailer off of you, and then they have their guys take it in for you, and they just have a chemical process that they go through and dispose of it. Other places like Tooele, Utah, they just pile it into a big pile and just light it up. because there's absolutely nothing out there for them to blow up except for some cows, maybe.
Well, that seems like kind of a fun thing to witness, I guess, from a very safe distance far away,
Yes.
especially,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
giant fire like that. Now, we've talked about the dangerous side of things, whenever it comes to, the working on the road. But now that you're back at home, you've taken up an interesting hobby that is, you
Mhm.
said, is driving your wife crazy. But you've become a very passionate plant dad. Can you give us a little bit of a journey, or tell us the story about your journey into plant daddom?
Yeah, we just moved into a new place in South Philly, and it was pretty small. So I bought two golden pothos plants from Home Depot, just like $10 little house plants. You can buy them anywhere. The problem is that with enough sunlight and fertilization and water, they grow like crazy. Within 6 months, that plant was probably 10 feet long. I'm not kidding. And then I found out you can propagate them. So you just cut each leaf off at the node, put it in some water, and now you've got 1,000 pothos plants. So that kind of exploded from there. I'm on like my fourth generation propagation from that. I keep giving them away to friends because I just keep running out of space with these plants. So from the pothos, I found some other friends that had other plants. Now I have like a couple of monsteras, and yeah, it just my wife actually asked me a couple of months ago, like, how many plants do you think you have? And I said, I don't know, 20. And we actually went through and counted it, and it was up to like 87. I was like, oh no, I have a problem.
So yeah, you definitely took the COVID lockdowns as seriously as the
Yeah.
rest of us, with getting tons of plants. Because I think I'm right there about the same amount of plants as you. I don't want to go back and count, because the last time I counted, it was more than 70. So we're just going to remain ignorant to that effect. But I will take one of your props from the pothos plant, because I just unfortunately killed one of mine that I have at the
Wow.
house. But as we sort of wrap out the show, let's your retirement plan. I wanted to make sure that I got this one in there, because it's a super
Mm.
cute picture that we have of you and your son. I believe it's your son. But the retirement plan is to become Santa. When do you expect to take on that role and responsibility? Important role and
You know,
responsibility.
so that particular Santa, he was in New Jersey, and he told me I could pull it off today, right now. There's like sprays that you can buy to like spray paint your beard, or some guys dye them. I actually got into this because one of my friends that my parents were stationed with when they were in the Air Force. His name is Randy. He's a professional Santa Claus now, and when I knew him, he was just this guy with this cool mustache. And when he retired from the Air Force, he got a job in an office, and they had a beard growing contest one day. And when it grew in, they were like, "Oh, Randy, you look like Santa Claus." And he's like, "Really?" And so he got an agent and went to Colorado to this Santa Claus school, and he's been doing it ever since. He Before COVID, he was his agent got him a gig in Shenzhen, China, to be the official Santa Claus for like this luxury resort out there. And I was like, that's
What?
the Santa Claus I want to be. Yeah, yeah.
Hold on.
It's a crazy gig because even like your low quality mall Santa Claus, they can make up to $100 an hour.
Really? Wow,
Oh
there's
yeah,
good
and
money in
now
being Santa.
yeah, and then with COVID, they had to get real in they had to be creative with this stuff, because now they went to remote calling. He would do Skype calls or Zoom calls or TikToks and stuff with kids, because they're not doing anything face to face as Santa Claus, and so you charge the parents 20 to $50 per session for a half an hour with Santa Claus. Easy money.
Santa is making money out here. Not to
Yeah,
mention that, but you have to have an agent to be a Santa and go to Santa school. Like that is, I
yeah,
never knew that about. I assume there was some part of, some training aspects of it, but it didn't seem like you had to do that much training. But to have an
yeah.
agent, like that is that's some serious Santaing.
Yeah, because it's not just putting the kid on your lap and asking what they want for Christmas. A lot of these guys, they do charity gigs for like cancer wards at
Mm.
hospitals. And so when you have a kid and you say, "Hey, Billy, what do you want for Christmas?" and they say, "I want to, live the next year," you have to know how to respond to these like absolutely horrific sob stories to kids.
Oh wow, that's yeah. That I mean, you bring up a great point, because it's so much more than just, hey, what do you want for Christmas, and just moving them
Yeah.
along. So really great perspective. I love the retirement plan. Maybe Mrs. Claus, will have, some kind of an agent, Mrs. Claus, sort of school as well that, maybe I could look into in the future. But I appreciate your time today and sharing your perspective and your experience, especially because I think you're one of the most, interesting guys, that's out there creating content. You have all of these really cool hobbies, a former trucker, and now you're a full-time content creator. So I think it's really cool to watch your journey. And speaking of, all the content that you've created, where can folks follow your work, follow Back the Truck Up, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so we're at backthetruckup.com. Our Twitter is back the truck. We're also on TikTok, back the truck, Instagram, back the truck up. My personal Twitter is at Super Trucker. The name is completely ironic, I promise you.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing all of your expertise. It was really, really fun conversation, especially around the Queen, as with everything that's happened today. So really cool stories, and thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you.
Absolutely. So with Truck Driver Appreciation Week happening next week, if you're scrambling for ideas, based off of that conversation with Justin, just give your drivers cash. Like that is the biggest way, their time off or cash. That is the biggest way, paid time off, I should probably mention, not unpaid time off. So that is the easiest way to show, true appreciation for your drivers, is just giving them a little bit of time off and helping them out with their probably crazy bills that a lot of, folks are experiencing. So for our final topic, I wanted to make sure that I hit on this because tonight is obviously the start of the NFL season. So you probably got your lineups. If you're any kind of NFL fan, you probably play fantasy football as well. And speaking of which, tonight the NFL season kicks off, but I wanted to talk about how fantasy football has saved Yahoo, the brand. And so fantasy football has, kind of diving into the history of this, fantasy football has been around since the early 60s, where the initial rules were developed or invented by Oakland Raiders staffers and a reporter. And by 1989, over 1 million people had taken up the hobby. And back then, and when I say back then, like it's really back then, because you had to write down all of the players that you were taking. You had to write down the draft of which player was taken in which round. And then you had to manually calculate how all of those scores lined up using the Monday morning paper, the sports section, and the stat line. That's personally how I got started with fantasy football years and years ago. If you're watching on the screen, you can kind of see our all-girls league that we've had for more than a decade. I've been playing fantasy football, longer than that. And we have always used Yahoo Fantasy Football. And if you remember, Yahoo was really the dominant tech company back in the 90s. If you think of with the hierarchy of where Apple is today, where Google is today, that was Yahoo back in the 90s. But there was a series of unfortunate events, a series of unfortunate business decisions that they did not make and that they did make that caused the company to essentially crumble into, the shell of what it once was. So, quick recap. In the late 90s, Yahoo was poised to become the biggest name in tech. They also had a chance to buy Google twice, didn't make it happen. Also had a chance to buy Facebook, didn't make it happen. Their revenue peaked in 2007 and shrinking every single year since then. But to their credit, they were very early to the portal scene, which is kind of like that AOL screen that you use to sign in. And then the internet as we knew it was within that portal system. So they were very new to that scene. And that's how they dominated for so long. But the reason that they've been around for so long still to this day is because of fantasy football. And this Mashable Tales of the Early Internet series was published back in 2020. And it talked about the history of the company and how Yahoo was an insanely rich company trading around $500 a share. But in July of 1999, they created the fantasy football product and just gave it away for free. And so back in 2019, Fox Business reported that about 7 million users still have a Yahoo account specifically for fantasy football. And the biggest reason that people have still a Yahoo account, a Yahoo email that they probably never check, is because of two big reasons of why fantasy football players or fantasy football users won't leave the platform. And that is a couple of different quotes. And I want to read one of them to you. And it's why users won't leave Yahoo. And they said there's never been this is a person who runs a league, and he said there's never been a conversation about, hey, let's switch to another format. This is a 49-year-old man in California who's been playing in a Yahoo league for 14 years. He said Yahoo does make it easy. We're a bunch of lazy old farts now, and to actually adapt to another format would be inconceivable. I think we'd quit playing rather than switch to another format, which is incredible to hear. And then this other piece of information that I personally check each year with my fantasy league, and it's the historical data and the importance of the historical data, no matter if you're a younger or an older player, because history does matter when it comes to fantasy football. And a quote from this gentleman, he says, Yahoo has easy to use tools that let you look through the history of your league. You can see how many times each person has won, how Yahoo rates your performance over time, or the playoff scores from every single season. If you've had a league going for a decade, you don't want to lose that history. You don't want to trash the results. You want to actually trash the results from back in the day, is what I would make the argument of. And so we can look at Yahoo and see them as a company that's full of failures, but present day, millions of people still use that platform in order to have a bond and a relationship with people that they might not typically see. And those are the people that are in your fantasy football league. So I thought that was a really cool story as we, sort of kick off fantasy football season and football season in general. College kicked off last week, so we got NFL going strong this week, and it starts with Thursday night football tonight. So I wanted to say a quick happy start to the football season. Thank you all for tuning into the show. Once again, my name is Blythe Brumley. You can find more of my work over at everythingislogistics.com. We will be right back here next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with another great show for you. Thank you for tuning in.